Kshitij, we'll have Shilpa coming in the backdrop. Perfect. Okay. Oh yeah, there's it. Okay, great. Well, hello everybody, and thanks so much for joining in. My name is Nara from NDTV, and it's an absolute delight to be moderating this panel because it is arguably the biggest buzzword after Donald Trump in this year's WEF. That is AI, and it's only befitting that the state which is usually taken the lead when it comes to all things technology has decided to set up this panel, and that is, of course, the state of Andhra Pradesh. And on the panel today, let me go by the order in which I have the names with me. We have Shilpa Kolhatkar. She's Global Head of AI Nations at NVIDIA, and it's a delight to talk to her, of course. Professor Daniel Susskind, Senior Research Associate, Institute for Ethics in AI, and Associate Member of the Economics Department, University of Oxford from UK. Professor Jay Lee, Distinguished Professor and Director at Industrial Artificial Intelligence Center, University of Maryland, USA. Seri Kreis, Professor of Cybersecurity, University of Oxford, United Kingdom. Professor Ricardo Hausman, Founder and Director of Growth Lab, Harvard University, USA. And of course, Honorable Minister Nara Lokesh from the state. So great. It was lovely to see the panel yesterday, Minister Lokesh, and it's a great setup that we have today. Can I just start off with the thesis behind you doing this right here at the WEF? Because yes, AI is at the front and center, but some of the topics that have been chosen have been curated carefully to drive home a message about what the state wants to do as well.
Thanks to all the panelists for making it and taking time out. Really appreciate it. No, as a state, we are very cognizant that AI is here. It is fundamentally going to transform the way we're going to do things. I think the other theme that's been going is, are we going to be the disruptor or are we going to be disrupted? That's the theme that I hear across WEF this year. And Andhra Pradesh wants to be the disruptor. So what we want to gauge is, what is it that we need to do as a state? And how do you prepare the citizens for it? And how can we tap the power of AI for our farmers, for our artisans, for our carpenters, for our electricians? I think there's something substantive that we can do as a nation, and this is why we wanted to set this panel up and really learn from them. And parallelly, what we're looking at to do in Andhra Pradesh is to actually do an AI university, which is collaborative. We want to bring the industry to lead this entire initiative. We've done this in the past with the Indian School of Business. It's called ISB. We've done this in, I think, the late 90s. And now I think time has come for India also to leapfrog, even in education. So I think that's a bit of context to why we are here.
Okay. Well, let me start. Usually we start ladies first. I'm not going to follow that because it's an equal panel here. Let me start from the far left and Professor Hausman, because it kind of flows in nicely with what Minister Lokesh just mentioned as well. How do you think institutions and the state, be it any state, whether it's Andhra Pradesh or otherwise, collaborate to bring forth the best practices, the best kind of learning models for the entire ecosystem to benefit out of this buzzword? I won't call it just a buzzword, a technology which people say is probably even bigger than the internet of 2000.
So my main piece of advice is to say the following. AI is what they call a general purpose technology. It is going to permeate across all human activities. So there is going to be very, very few people who will be needed to figure out kind of like the algorithm, the learning algorithms, the backbone, the hardware, the NVIDIAs of this world, right? But we need a lot of people to simply think, what are the human challenges you want to solve? And to what extent AI can allow you to do more than what you would have done without it. So if we, if you think that AI is a hammer, you're looking for nails. If we focus our attention on the things that really matter to us, and be sufficiently cognizant of AI, we will be able to find killer apps for AI that have yet to be developed. You know, one of the reasons why there was a bust after the dot-com boom is because we invested a hell of a lot in the backbone and in the hardware and so on, and we didn't have the killer apps. That was before YouTube, that was before Netflix, that was before Amazon, that was before many, many things, right? So we are at that stage. We have something that empowers, enables to do many things. We just don't know what yet. So I would say, think hard about what are the key problems in your state, in your country, that you would like to address. You know, we would like to improve the quality of education. We would like to improve the quality of healthcare. We would like to do many things in life, right? Well, now we have this. Don't think just about the hammer. Think about your goals and think about how you can achieve your goals using these instruments. And I would say that is where the killer apps are going to come from. And let me tell you, if you focus on your problems, on your headaches, on your obsessions, you will probably solve them. But let me tell you a secret. You're not the only one with those headaches. So your solutions are going to be solutions for the world. But you're going to get to those solutions for the world by understanding the specific problems you want to solve.
This is something that came in yesterday's panel as well, that instead of trying to look for solutions that might be available, let states, let companies and let countries define what their problems are, and then go to companies for trying to figure out whether the companies can help them create the solutions for those problems or no. And by the way, let's keep this a bit free-flowing. So if anybody wants to come in at any point of time, just please come in, including Minister Lokesh as well. But Professor Lee, can I come to you on this? Because you seem to be wanting to make a statement.
Yeah, I agree with Ricardo's comments, because typically when we say AI, right, I made comments earlier at lunch, right, we call ABC. Three algorithms, big data, and computing. That's called 3 elements. But that's horizontal. Vertical called domain, healthcare domain, energy domain, right? Semiconductor domain, etc., etc. So if you focus on one domain as a purpose, then you look for the problem source. Then you develop AI process. I call 3P. Purpose, problem, process. Then you hit the goal. So to me, if you take a healthcare domain, which I made a comment earlier, right? Healthcare, FDA took 18 years to approve about 40 or 50, 60 drugs a year. 18 years. 7 years is a clinical trial. 11 years is do all kinds of testing and development. If you shrink the 11 years down to 2 years, how many lives are going to save? Lots of lives. Every country needs it. Every country. Entire world needs it, right? This is collaborative work. So you look at the positive, the area for that. Of course, you got to find what's the problem source first. So I do agree. I think we need to look at that kind of a killer M as a collaborative winning.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Shilpa, you want to weigh in on this, because I think there is a lot of question around that what state, and the key point about today's conversation was, can we shape the future of next gen AI, right? I mean, innovative hub, data factory, etc., and AI university that Minister Lokesh referred to. How does a state collaborate with different stakeholders in this whole AI ecosystem to do the best of all of these things?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, what Honorable Minister Nara Lokesh ji mentioned, the government backing up these missions or having these initiatives around leading with AI, from a state like Andhra Pradesh, but not just for Andhra, but something that applies for the whole world. As Professor Ricardo mentioned, there are problems which are prevalent, not just to a certain state or a country. There are some problems which are like healthcare, for example, or education, which have a pretty, its applicabilities across large segments of the world. And in that sense, I truly believe that democratization of AI is important. And everybody, what that means is everybody should be able to take advantage of AI as a tool. Not everybody is going to be a machine learning engineer or a data scientist, but using AI as a tool and having the access to build solutions for their specific problems is the key. And that's possible through democratization of AI, through making education and training and upskilling available. And hence, I think government and states can play a really important role in supporting these initiatives that democratize AI education, with a strong focus on strengthening STEM education at all the levels, with a particular emphasis on AI and data science.
Okay, well, I was going to ask Professor Susskind about this as well, but Professor Kreese has said that she just wanted to make a comment on this, yes. So please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to the Minister for such a kind invitation. I just wanted to add my thoughts on this. I'm a computer scientist by training who became a cybersecurity expert, and I'm fairly certain you'll find lots of uses for AI. As I look around the room, I'm looking at energy, urban centres. We've been using machine learning for years. We know it can help us spot patterns in data that are really hard for humans to spot. We have huge data sets through the instrumentization of our environments. So if you're building smart cities or you're trying to manage manufacturing environments, process control, whatever it may be, there's definitely going to be opportunities. So I'll park that. I think that's for certain. I just wanted to come in on the educational piece and to urge you to think about a principled way of building the workforce of the future. And it's one that I benefited from as a computer scientist, and it's this. Teach our workforce transferable technology skills. So when I was taught computer science, I didn't attend a class to learn a coding language. I attended classes to learn how to write good code that works as it should do, efficient code. And then I was taught how to learn any language, whichever language was the one that everybody wanted to use. And I think that principled approach should apply in AI. What we need is people that know how to collect data, store data, label data, manage the integrity of data that's going to be inside the training. We need to teach people how to write the inference engines, no matter what platform they're writing it on. Think about what it means to learn, to help a model learn. And then we need to teach people how you write good models for understanding the environment and the importance of the interface. We may find that in the state in the future, that when we go and look at how you're managing the green energy emission, that we'll go in and we'll see folks in immersive technology and they're interacting with visual interfaces. But underneath that, same model, same inference engine, same data that might actually sit underneath another interface. And so I think there's such a huge opportunity, and it's a moment for us to make sure we don't get buried in the silos, that we take a principled approach, because then we can do the 3 Ps no matter which of the verticals we're in.
Yeah, and Minister Lokesh, I would like to come in on this, but after a comment from Professor Susskind, because he looks at this argument closely, if I'm not wrong, and I would love to understand from you, because something that I was talking to Professor Creed about, that the pace of development in this field is so rapid. What is it that, let's say, for example, an AI university that the state is thinking of can have as a necessary set of skill imparting that can help the students not just navigate through the AI challenges of today, sure, but over the course of the next few years, maybe?
Sure. So I think when we think about skills in education, there are sort of 3 dimensions to this. The first is the what. What skills and what capabilities are we providing people with? And that, I think, is the one that gets most of the oxygen among politicians and policymakers, trying to anticipate what jobs will be valuable in the future, and so what skills do we need to teach people today. But I think there are 2 other really important dimensions to education, which sometimes get neglected. So alongside the what, there's also the how. You know, if you were to step into a time machine and go back 100 years and walk into a classroom or a lecture theatre, it would look remarkably similar to how they look today, despite the existence of many really interesting technological alternatives. So just one example. We know that one-to-one tuition with a human tutor is incredibly effective. An average student who receives one-to-one tuition will tend to outperform 98% of students in a traditional classroom setting. The problem is, of course, that providing everyone with a one-to-one tutor is incredibly expensive. Lucky to do it at some universities, but it's not a model that can scale. And that's what's so interesting about some of the systems that are being developed now, the personalized learning systems. Because what they're doing is they are tailoring in an automated way what is taught, how it's taught, the pace and so on, to the particular skills and weaknesses of the student in question. Kind of replicating that very effective but very expensive human model. And so, I thought it was very interesting that in the first few months of ChatGPT coming out, one of the first partnerships they did was with Salman Khan, who's the developer of Khan Academy, online platform providing instructional videos and practice problems, really high quality stuff. When I used to teach maths, I'd often direct my students towards it, really high quality resource. But what he did was he teamed up with ChatGPT to develop what he's called Khan Migo, which is essentially a tutor that sits with you as you're navigating the site and provides the kind of interaction that you might get from a human tutor. So I think the how is really important as well. How are we using technology to change how we educate as well? So there's the what, the how, and there's also, and this goes to your question exactly, the when. At what moments in people's lives are we providing them with the skills and the training required to flourish in the world of work? There is exactly as you say, there's a huge amount of uncertainty about the future. And the best response that we have to that uncertainty is flexibility. A willingness and a capacity for people to retrain and reskill later in life with the same intensity and seriousness with which, we sort of expect people to educate themselves at the start of their lives. And so, I know today people talk about things like lifelong learning and, governments have personalized learning budgets. But if you actually look at the resources we put behind those sorts of initiatives, they completely pale in comparison to the kind of investments we make in people at the start of their lives. And that can't be right. So my advice for a university like this is not simply to focus on the what, the sort of skills and the capabilities, but it's also the how. How are you using the technologies themselves to change the way you teach and educate? And also the when. What sorts of people, at what moments in their lives are you reaching out to them? And are you, tailoring what you're teaching to the particular requirements of that particular moment?
Minister Lokesh, I think in some fashion, all of this is very helpful because in India, considering the number of students out there, if you go for one-on-one human tutoring, then it's a profession that I would like to take up yesterday. It's going to be very rewarding. But any thoughts on that? And then also, just coupled with that, also a point that Professor Lee mentioned, right, about vertical needed. And you are out there setting up data factories, so to say. Give us some thoughts on that too.
No, the more fundamental thing for me is in government schools, how can we use AI? And how can we create the personalized adaptive learning platforms available and prescriptive homework? This is something that we're really passionate about. And as a state, I've been questioning my entire team that how do we go from passive learning to active learning? For lack of a better word, how do you gamify the entire classroom interaction between students and enable them to absorb content far better? I think this is something that this is a journey that we've just started. We've earmarked, and this is something that we're actually going to deliver. So that's one part. On the larger context, India has jumped over the personal computing, gone directly to smartphone, and then that presents a unique opportunity for us. So, healthcare. What's the role of wearables? If I want to look at preventive healthcare, is there technology out there where at least a pre-diagnosis can be done? So I know where to put my money, who to focus on, in terms of a unified, mandatory sort of a health platform coming in. So I think these are questions that we are also now asking ourselves. End of the day, every government has only so many resources. And as you rightly said, it's about putting that money where it actually makes sense and where outcomes can be measured and outcomes will be actually delivered. Right now, our entire system is focused more on outputs. And that's what I think is resulting in the challenges that we're facing.
Great. Okay. Professor Lee, can I come to you now? And, you know, one thing is, of course, the right kind of skills imparted in order to create the best AI experts that you can for the future. Now, I'd love to understand from you, because you've got a great working experience with startups as well. You've got a lot of thoughts on this subject. What are the key elements or the critical elements for which would be very necessary for creating the right set and the right number of AI experts for the future, not just from an Indian or an Andhra Pradesh perspective, but in general?
Well, we're more interested in create AI winner, not just an expert.
AI winner, okay.
So yeah, expert can be many things. Yeah, the expert sometimes is not necessarily a winner. So, well, let me put it this way. I like the term you call data factory because we are doing a data foundry at University of Maryland. So what a data foundry really is, because when you take the verticals, we have industry. You have electronic manufacturing verticals, automotive verticals, right? You have a lot of data people generate. But most of the data, they are maybe Excel sheet ready, but they're not machine learning ready. There's no background, no label. That's 80% of your work going to be. But if you have a data factory, you should have a good 3B. Baseline, background, and also good benchmarkable. I call 3B. If you have no baseline, no background, not benchmarkable, anybody can speak apple, orange, you cannot compare them. Number one. Number two, the teaching method. I like you say when, how, what, which is very good. But I think in industry, we're talking about industry, right? AI has to have economic evidence. You cannot say AI for fun. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but if you cannot have an economic impact, how long is it going to last for fun? Well, first of all, the principle base, which anybody can teach, and every professor can teach principle. Second, we focus on practice based. We create data sets that are ready to be used. You can learn different tools. Could be simply like support vector machine, self-organizer map, logistic regression, blah, 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 CNN, whatever, right? But third, problem-based. After you learn how to use the data, hey, go back to your own problem. Collect your own data. Oh, that's a tough one. Most people failed that third stage. I don't know what data. This is a company CEO. Hey, give me the data. What? I hire you to get data yourself. Yes, go hunt data. Nobody teaches them how to hunt data. Most people wait for their data coming. Right? Fourth, professional. You can teach other people repeat 1, 2, 3. I go 4P now. Principle-based, practice-based, and problem-based, and professional-based. Then you're ready to be AI winner.
Very nice thought, very powerful thought. Thanks, Professor Lee, for that. And you know, Professor Hausman, I don't know how much, I mean, to what degree you agree, and you want to add more there. But here's the question, right? One is to know that these are the things that need to be present in an AI winner. Two is from a university or a set of universities teaching AI skills to a data factory producing some of these AI winners. There will be skill gaps that exist, right? How does a state, how does a well-meaning leader address some of those skill gaps?
So let me start by saying something to frame this. I don't know, maybe because you're younger than me, maybe they didn't teach you in school calligraphy. But we don't teach calligraphy anymore because we don't write with our hands, right? We type, right? So there are some skills that are just not going to be needed. And one of the things that, for example, large language models are very good at is answering questions. And we try to measure how much our students learn by posing them questions and see if they answer questions. And we do that even in our PhD programs. During the first 2 years of the PhD program, they take courses, we ask questions, and they have to answer questions. But after they finish their courses and they have to do a thesis, the problem that they face is no longer how to answer questions. It's how to ask questions, right? And it is in the, finding the right question, right? If you want to query a large language model, well, how do you query it? With questions, right? So where are your questions coming from? How do you teach to learn, to ask, You know, what are the kinds of questions you ask about the world, right? What is it that you want to learn, right? It's not, so I think that there's a dimension. By the way, many students that perform spectacularly in their first 2 years of their PhD then fail because they cannot go from being very good at answering somebody else's question to ask their own. So I think that the more AI is good at answering questions, the higher the price of being good at asking questions. In some sense, we are the ones asking the questions. And that's the better the AI tools will be, the more value will be to the skill of asking questions.
How do you kind of get those skills going in students? I would love to know what are the right questions to ask. How do I do that? If a student after 2 years is not able to do that in the third year, how do you make it as a normal program, linear program?
So, you know, let me tell you, we want to revolutionize everything, but even we have not been able to overcome the apprenticeship model, even in our PhD programs. Okay, we put them for 2 years in school. These days, a PhD in economics lasts 6 years. So 2 years in school, and the other 4 years, it's in an apprenticeship program where we don't know how to teach the stuff we do. The only thing you can pick it up by seeing other people doing, by trying to do it yourself. So it's an apprenticeship model. And I would even criticize my own profession, saying, you know, even when we teach economics, we teach, say, models, and we teach how these models can answer what-if questions, right? But when you go to the world, nobody tells you what the model is. So you have to figure out, you know, there's this, you know, I don't know, the shoe hurts, etc., but I don't know what the model is. I don't know what the data is. I don't know what the problem is. I have to figure it out from scratch. It's that process from, you know, finding problems in the world to figuring out how to structure your mind around them, how to find pathways to theories of change of what it is that you're going to do to figure things out. And I think that is what's going to be at a premium, and that's what we should focus our teaching on.
Okay, now I'm going to come to regulation and threats as well, but since we spoke about industry, and Professor Lee spoke about industry, right, and what does a nation have to do to make it economically viable as well, Shilpa, I'd like to come to you. I mean, to your mind, what are the critical elements, because you do this for a living per se, right? What are the critical elements that a state like Andhra Pradesh, for example, has to do in order to create a thriving AI ecosystem, which is, one, fundamentally sound, having the adequate skill sets for people, at the same time, economically viable as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, and, you know, as Minister Lokesh ji mentioned, the most essential thing is around outcomes. What outcomes is the nation trying to solve? So that is at the highest level. But what enables that, the ingredients that enable those outcomes, what make the nation an AI nation is, having a skilled workforce, having that ecosystem of entrepreneurs, of VCs, of researchers who can basically, create AI. Eventually, it is also about the access to compute. So to enable those data factories, those AI factories, which is essentially around the production of AI, it is important to think about it that you need the business ecosystems, the data, the infrastructure, the skill set in the workforce that can enable that factory, that can enable that production. I truly believe, like India, with its large talent pool and growing tech sector, can indeed play a very pivotal role, not only for itself, but for the global AI landscape there. And harnessing, basically the availability of data, and then of course processing that data, managing that data, and then harnessing insights from that is what we call that tokens or intelligence. So in a factory, in this AI factory, raw material is data, output is tokens or intelligence. And this intelligence can then, for the industry, be used for various sectors, right? Agriculture, healthcare, education were mentioned earlier. I think this is basically the key ingredients: business ecosystems, data, infrastructure, skill sets.
Okay. Well, a couple of other key elements for this would be cybersecurity. And Mr. Lokesh, please free to come in whenever, but one of the two things is cybersecurity and the regulation that should be put in place. So, Professor Susskind, the question that I've noted down for you, and I'd like to ask you, is that what's the AI regulation that should be firmly in place for any ecosystem to ensure its ethical use and a fit and proper use? I mean, if you broadly understand what I'm trying to ask, I mean, what are the regulations that should be put in place?
Or should regulations even be? Is it too early?
Is it too early?
Putting the cart ahead of the horse?
Yeah, I mean, I think very broadly, there is a lot of discussion today about the sort of technical limits to AI, what can and cannot be automated. But I think, and you know, every day we're told stories of new tasks and activities that these systems can take on, making medical diagnoses, composing jokes, writing legal arguments, designing buildings. You know, it's a sort of bafflingly impressive list. But I think we spend not enough time focusing on not the technical limits, but the moral limits, not what these technologies can and cannot do, but what they should and should not do. And we already, face these questions today. You know, there are systems in the US that are used to, AI systems that are used to inform parole decisions. And we might feel comfortable with that, but how would we feel about using a system to make, say, a life sentencing decision? Probably far less comfortable. There are systems in the medical setting which, as I said, can make medical diagnoses, and we might think, that's a terrific thing, but how would we feel about using a system in a hospital to decide whether or not to turn off life support systems based on, all the available data about, scarce beds, vitals, demand, and so on? Probably far less comfortable. And I think these sort of moral limits to these technologies are, already binding on us, and in a way are kind of far more important than the technical limits to these systems. And it's these kind of moral limits that need to be reflected in the sort of regulatory regimes that we design. But exactly as you say, the challenge is that these technologies, we are regulating. If we attempt to regulate, we are going to be regulating something that we don't quite know what it looks like. And you only need to think about all the different ways in which the generative systems of the last few years have taken us by surprise in terms of what they can and cannot do to recognize the sort of immense scale of the challenge.
Okay. So, Professor Kreis, if we do this and try to put regulations, are we putting the cart before the horse or no? And part two, because you look at cybersecurity so closely, right? I was talking to Dr. Dorit Dor of Checkpoint earlier today, and she was of the belief that while there is a 44% rise in cyber attacks across the world in 2024, AI would only enhance the possibility of these in the future as well. And there's a possibility to defend as well via use of AI. So both these questions to you.
Gosh, they're both really hard to answer, so I will do my best. On the first question, are we regulating too early? Well, yes and no. I mean, it depends what you're regulating for. So what we have to do, and I'm going to go through the cybersecurity piece and then we'll get to the answer. When I think about AI and cybersecurity, I think about points of a triangle, three general areas where these two things are coming together. The one I'm not going to speak so much about is the use of machine learning and AI to enhance our cyber defense capabilities, our ability to protect our systems. That's been happening since the last century, as my daughter says, since the Ice Age, and it will continue to happen. Thank goodness, because we're going to have to match up to some pretty voracious and strong attacks. So we'll talk about that. There's kind of two areas we have to be really concerned about right now. One is, could our use of AI make us more vulnerable? Of course, yes. Whenever we embrace new technology, or whenever we change technology, there's the potential for new vulnerability. We've known that for years. The highly regulated markets, like, for example, the financial sector, which grew a lot of the growth and maturity in the profession, before 2010, in the early 2000s, since before the term cybersecurity, when we were all working in information assurance, inside those regulations and good practices, we did things like make sure if you have a big system upgrade, you're going to test it, you'll pen test it. This is security testing, this is looking for vulnerability. All of those good things we see translating into the recommendations for good practice around security of AI. But there's some challenges for us. There's something very different about the way in which machine learning and AI works. We know that they're inherently vulnerable, and we can see in the research, security research community, both in industry and academia, and in government, examples of how people are managing to compromise systems, either via the training data or via the inference engine or via the model. Once this stuff's in use, of course, your operational security head will be thinking about insider threats, people just conventionally being able to get access and modify, sabotage systems. What can they then do with that? So we have a challenge. Some of these vulnerabilities are new, and they're an evolution of an old type, but the way in which we bring them about and consider whether they can be exploited to do us harm, that's knowledge we're learning, and we're learning fast. Some of the work that's out there exploring the general framework of vulnerability, which could help all of us procure AI, driven by our appetite for risk or risks we want to avoid, that's showing us that there are similarities across different kind of models and machine learning. So that's really interesting in terms of vulnerability. So you can have a very different machine learning problem, a different vertical, different technology solution, and yet they're vulnerable to a similar attack. Okay, so that's positive in that whatever we do to develop protection is translatable. Negative in that the attacker community, therefore, might only need to learn one kind of attack tool, one weaponization strategy, and attack multiple sites. So that's the other corner of the triangle. What's this doing to the toxicity of cyberspace in which our organizations are going to operate? And that's worrying because machine learning has been used for years, on and off, to enhance attacks. And what we're seeing in the advent, the big investments happening in large language models is, of course, opportunities for attackers to predict our vulnerability better, because they can predict more about us as humans and the way in which we live. And if you can do that, you can target people, and often people are the way into the enterprise. But you can possibly also use this stuff to understand our playbooks, how we defend our enterprises. And if you can do that, and you can predict what I'm going to do to defend myself, then maybe you can influence me to do something else, which makes me vulnerable in a different way. Or you can design your attack strategy that makes it way more potent against me. So there's some concerning things here which we will have to deal with from the outset. And then I know I've been talking for too long. So now I'm going to return to the cart before the horse question. It's this. We have to think about how we protect ourselves in a number of ways. There's been a lot of talk in shift left amongst the community, and the WEF has been doing brilliant work in helping us understand. By shift left, we mean push the issue of security earlier on in the development cycle. Shift left for you, which means security by design in every way. But then what we have to do is not just stick with shift left, we have to expand right and do way more in terms of operational security around the stuff when it's in place, in practice. Otherwise, someone's going to hack your system and cause you a big problem. And then you have to kind of constantly repeat, because these things are changing so fast. And the organization is changing fast in terms of what it wants to do. The threat environment's changing really fast. And then the AI technology business is going to bring about massive change. And you know what? We're going to be collecting all sorts of new data we never thought we were going to. And our staff are changing fast. So probably there is something right now in that process, how we're going about doing security by design, embedding as much prevention of vulnerability as we can. Maybe there's something that could be done there. That would not be cart before horse in my mind. But this whole question about how you use things like regulation really needs embracing in the context of this fast, dynamic cadence that we're going to need. It's going to need more than that, right? We're going to have to build norms of behaviours. We're going to have to think about how we get business leaders totally engaged to build cultures in organisations that are inherently secure and resilient inside their DNA and the way people are thinking, because we won't be able to keep pace if we are solely focused on things like law and regulation and things like that.
Okay. We have last 3 minutes, and before I ask the final question to Minister Lokesh, anybody else wants to weigh in on the threats? Because we've spoken enough about this, but otherwise, Mr. Lokesh, my last question is to you. India has this AI mission, the government of India, right? Compute capacity for the country. Some thoughts on that, and of course, how is the state collaborating with the center in order to help or do all of these things?
I mean, India's AI mission is the first step in the right direction, but I think we need to do a lot more.
Of course.
No second thoughts about it. I mean, that's why we have the panel here, because I wanted to hear from the experts on how should a state in India transform its entire approach to education, apart from creating a temple of excellence of higher learning and AI university. Apart from that, how do we transform education fundamentally? And how do I create next generation job creators and job seekers for jobs that we don't know? And that for me is fundamentally scary. And that's the thing that we are sort of grappling with as a state. And I think that's what also makes it very exciting for us. India has been the biggest beneficiary of the Y2K way back in 2000. And then, of course, we moved on to various other services. And now I think AI presents a unique opportunity for India, again, to leapfrog. But we also believe that AI should be a way of life. A housewife should be able to understand, use it. As I said in my opening remarks, a carpenter, a student for better understanding of concepts. Politicians should ethically use it. We've seen deep fakes coming in with generative AI. We've seen it especially in the last elections. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of us, but I think it's very interesting times. And I think, as you've said, how do we create a framework for all of us to sort of operate it, and it doesn't create any ethical and moral dilemma and physical harm at the end of it.
Powerful thoughts here from a lot of answers that have come in for what a state can do, collaborating with other stakeholders to create the next generation AI winners. Professor Lee, I use that term very carefully now. But to all of you, thank you so much for joining in today and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time. Shilpa, thanks so much for joining virtually as well. Great having you. Right.
Thank you very much.
Yep, and everybody, thanks for joining. A round of applause for the panel, please.